Tavuta, the Aramaic word Jesus used that means return to yourself. You have been trying to forgive yourself for years, and the reason it has not worked is not because you lack the will, but because you have been using the wrong word. Jesus never taught forgiveness the way religion handed it to you. In the Aramaic language, he actually spoke. He used a word that means something entirely different, something far older and far more precise than the English translation ever captured. The word is Tavuta, and it does not ask you to pardon yourself, to excuse what happened, or to perform some ritual of emotional release that leaves you feeling hollow 3 days later. Tavuta asks only one thing of you: to return, to stop living in exile from yourself, and come back to the one place the guilt has kept you from the interior ground of who you actually are. This teaching was preserved in Aramaic for a reason, because Aramaic was built for depth, for laid meaning, for a kind of precision that no single translation can fully hold. And when you understand what Jesus was actually pointing to when he spoke of returning, the entire architecture of what you have called forgiveness will shift at its foundation. This is not theology. This is the most personal teaching you may ever encounter, and it begins with a single ancient word spoken directly into the exile you have been living in. The word forgiveness carries an enormous weight in spiritual culture, and much of that weight is the problem. For most people who have grown up in any tradition, influenced by Western religion, forgiveness is transactional. It is something you request from a higher power, something you grant to someone who wronged you, something you perform as a spiritual duty that you are never quite sure you have completed correctly. And self-forgiveness, the turning of that practice inward, becomes its own particular kind of suffering, because the judge and the judged are the same person, and the trial never ends. Jesus was not working within that framework. He was teaching in Aramaic, a Semitic language spoken throughout the ancient Near East, a language whose relationship to forgiveness was rooted not in transaction but in movement. In Aramaic, to forgive is not to cancel a debt on a ledger. It is to shift the position of the self in relation to something. It is a word of direction, of orientation, of the body and soul turning from one place and moving toward another. Before we enter Tavuta fully, there is something essential you must understand about the Aramaic language that Jesus taught in. Every Aramaic word carries multiple simultaneous layers of meaning, sonic, symbolic, and spiritual at once. A single word is not a fixed definition. It is a living field of resonance, and when Aramaic words are united with conscious intention, they do not simply combine, they unlock each other, creating a depth of meaning and spiritual architecture that none of them carries alone. This is why Jesus chose this language for his deepest teachings. It was designed to speak to the whole person, not just the mind-seeking doctrine, but the body holding grief and the soul searching for its original ground. The Aramaic word at the center of this teaching is Tiyavuta, written in Aramaic script as is commonly translated as repentance. But repentance in its modern usage suggests guilt, punishment, and debt payment, none of which are present in the Aramaic root. The root of Tavuta is twb, to turn, to return, to come back to where you originally were. It is a word of homecoming, not a word of shame. Tavuta, the return to yourself. Not a performance of sorrow, not a religious ritual, a movement inward and homeward, back to the self that existed before the exile that guilt created. The most illuminating place to watch Tavuta in action is not in a theological text. It is in a story Jesus told, one of the most famous narratives in all of recorded human history, and one of the most consistently misread. The parable of the prodigal son, found in Luke 15, is typically taught as a story about a father's forgiveness. But if you read it in the Aramaic tradition, it reveals itself to be something far more precise, a map of Tavuta from beginning to end. The son leaves. He takes his inheritance, goes to a distant country, and wastes everything he has. He ends up destitute, feeding pigs in a field, eating what the pigs leave behind. And then, this is the moment that carries everything the text says. He came to himself. If these Gnostic teachings are awakening a desire for inner transformation within you, we prepared to guides on the sacred words where this journey begins. The link is pinned in the comments. Not, he repented. Not, he felt guilty enough. He came to himself. In the Aramaic tradition, that phrase is Tavuta in its most naked and essential form. The return does not begin with a prayer. It begins with the simple, revolutionary act of stopping the flight and coming back to the one place the exile had made impossible: the interior ground of the self. The Father in the story does not wait for an apology. He does not require a performance of sufficient suffering before the forgiveness is granted. He sees the Son returning from a distance, still far away, and he runs. The embrace precedes the speech. The robe and the ring arrive before the confession is even finished. Because Tavuta, the return, was the act that mattered. Everything else followed from that single movement. This is what Jesus was pointing to when he spoke of forgiveness in Aramaic. The release you have been searching for is not granted from outside. It is already waiting inside the act of returning. You are not waiting for God to forgive you. You are waiting for yourself to stop running from yourself. The moment that stops, the Father is already running toward you. Tavuta does not ask you to feel differently about what happened. It asks you to change your position in relation to yourself, to turn from the exile and face inward, toward the home that guilt convinced you no longer existed. Guilt is extraordinarily efficient at one thing. It creates the sensation that you are too far from yourself to ever return, that the distance between who you are and who you should have been is simply too great to cross. It tells you that Tavuta, the return, is available to other people, but not to you, because what you carry is in a special category of unforgivable. This is not a spiritual condition. It is a cognitive one, and Jesus addressed it directly, not by arguing with the guilt, but by telling story after story in which the distance that felt permanent turned out to be nothing at all the moment the direction of movement changed. In the Gnostic tradition, closely associated with the circle of Jesus, the soul that has wandered into exile, into forgetting its own divine origin, is never described as permanently lost. It is described as sleeping, as veiled, as disoriented. The Pistis Sophia, one of the most detailed Gnostic texts of the ancient world, portrays the soul's fall and return as the central drama of human spiritual existence, and the return is always presented not as a reward for sufficient suffering, but as an inherent possibility that exists in every moment the soul chooses to face inward. Tavuta operates exactly this way. It is not a distant destination that must be earned through adequate contrition. It is a direction, and direction can be changed in an instant, not by feeling ready, not by feeling worthy, but by the simple act of turning. What makes this so radical is that it removes the middle stage that most forgiveness traditions require. The stage of earning. In the conventional framework, you must demonstrate sufficient remorse before the forgiveness becomes available. In Tavuta, the return itself is the demonstration, and it is available right now in the exact condition you are in. The son in the parable does not clean himself up before going home. He goes home dirty, hungry, and broken, and the home receives him exactly as he is. This is the teaching that has been waiting inside the Aramaic language patient, precise, and completely contrary to everything the guilt culture version of forgiveness has taught you to believe about your own return. There is a scene in the Gospels that looks, on its surface, like an act of anger, but through the lens of Tavuta, it becomes something else entirely. When Jesus enters the temple and overturns the tables of the money changers, the traditional reading frames this as prophetic judgment, an act of righteous anger against corruption. And that reading is not wrong, but it is not the only layer available. In the Aramaic tradition, the temple was not only an external building, it was a symbol of the interior sacred space of the human being. The mystics and Gnostics of the period understood the temple as the architecture of the self, the Holy of Holies, not as a room in Jerusalem, but as the deepest interior chamber of a person's being. And what had happened to that temple? It had been occupied by exchanges that did not belong there, by transactions rooted in fear, in guilt, in the commodification of access to the sacred, by everything that was not native to the original holy ground. Tavuta, when applied to the self, does exactly what Jesus did in that temple. It does not negotiate with what does not belong. It does not politely ask the judgment to leave or try to make peace with the guilt that has set up permanent residence in the sacred interior. It overturns the tables. It restores the space to its original function, not by adding anything, but by removing what was never supposed to be there. The self-forgiveness that Tavuta points toward is not a performance of emotional generosity toward yourself. It is a clearing, A restoration, a return of the interior temple to the function it always had before the exile began. What does not belong in your interior temple? The voices that catalog your failures with more precision than your gifts. The judgment that arrives with the fluency of a native language and the weight of absolute authority. The sentence that has been running sometimes for decades without appeal or parole. Tavuta does not argue with those voices. It simply turns away from them and turns toward the interior ground they have been keeping you from. And in that turning, the tables fall. Tavuta is the beginning of a sequence. Once the return is initiated, once the exile ends and the interior ground is re-established, the 3 Aramaic words of the previous teaching are waiting. Each one a deeper layer of the same homecoming. Shlama, wholeness, is what you land in when Tavuta brings you home. It is the ground that was always there beneath the guilt, exactly as whole as it was before the exile. Yada, the embodied knowing, is what begins to emerge when the judgment no longer fills every interior space. A clearer, more honest perception of who you actually are, what you actually carry, what has always been true beneath the story the guilt told. And neuroclarity, luminous awareness, is the quality of seeing that becomes available when the interior temple has been cleared, and the space can finally receive the light it was built to hold. Te yaub, u te a, sh lea aemea, ya danura, the return, the ground, the knowing, the light. A complete architecture of self-forgiveness in 4 Aramaic words, each one a stage, each one unlocking the next, together forming a map that Jesus encoded in a language built for exactly this kind of depth. Te, iauvo, u, te, in practice. A bridge between ancient Aramaic wisdom and present-day inner work. This is not a ritual requiring belief. It is a somatic and contemplative practice grounded in the Aramaic teaching of Tavuta and integrated with evidence-based modern approaches to emotional regulation, breathwork, and self-compassion. You need only 5 to 10 minutes and a quiet space. Step 1. Locate the exile somatic awareness. 2 minutes sit with both feet on the ground. Close your eyes. Ask yourself, where in my body do I carry the weight of what I have not forgiven myself for? Do not answer with words. Let your body answer a heaviness in the chest, a constriction in the throat, a tension in the jaw or stomach. Place one hand there. Do not try to change it. Simply locate it. This is where the exile lives in you, not in the mind, but in the body. Step 2. Speak the return Aramaic as frequency. 2 minutes with your hand still resting on that place in your body. Begin to breathe slowly and deeply. Onechexale speak or whisper the word Tavuta, not as a prayer to an external power, but as a direction you are giving yourself. You are not asking for forgiveness. You are announcing a return. Let the sound of the word travel from your mouth into your chest. In Aramaic, sound carried meaning in the body. The ancient practitioners understood that sacred words, spoken with intention, create a vibrational field that the nervous system responds to. Repeat Tavuta 4, 6 to 10 breath cycles. Step 3. Write the one sentence. Expressive writing. Those minutes. Open your eyes. In a journal or on any paper, write one sentence only. Beginning with the words, I have been living in exile from myself because do not edit Italiano. Do not read it back. The act of writing it is the act of seeing the exile clearly for the first time, which is the beginning of Tavuta neuroscientific research on expressive writing, consistently shows that naming an internal experience with precision reduces its autonomic nervous system charge. Yada. The embodied knowing works this way too. Step 4. The Shlama breath. Nervous system regulation. 2 minutes breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 8. On te exhale silently speak Shlama. This extended exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, signaling safety to the body. You are not performing peace. You are allowing the body to find the ground that was always beneath the exile. Repeat 4 times. Step 5. The neuro recognition 1 minute, with eyes still closed. Ask, what is one thing that is still true about me that the exile did not erase? One quality, one capacity, one thread of the self that survived. Do not answer with effort. Let it arrive. when it aribus, however small, that is, Nora. The light that was not extinguished. Acknowledge it. Place your hand on your chest and breathe it in. The protocol does not require that you feel forgiven at the end. It requires only that you have turned. Tavuta is the turning, not the arrival. The arrival takes care of itself. Jesus encoded Tavuta in a language that refused to reduce it. In Aramaic, the word carries the full weight of what it actually means, a turning of the whole self, a change of direction so complete that the body, the emotions, and the spirit all participate in it. It is not a word for the mind alone. It is a word for the person, for the entire integrated being that guilt has held at a distance from its own interior ground. You were never as far from yourself as the exile made you feel. The distance that seemed uncrossable was always the distance of a single turning. The father in the parable was already running before the son had finished rehearsing his apology, because the return was never about the speech. It was about the direction. Tavuta is that direction. Shlama is the ground it leads you home to. Yada is the honest seeing that becomes possible when you are no longer living and hiding from yourself. And Nura is the clarity, quiet, unearned, and absolutely real, that fills the interior space the exile had kept dark. The temple of your interior life has not been destroyed. It has been occupied by things that do not belong there. And you now hold the teaching that Jesus embedded in Aramaic, the precise ancient and living instruction for overturning the tables and restoring what was always sacred to the function it was always meant to carry. You do not need to be ready to return. You only need to turn. Visit Divine Light Academy, my site dedicated to bridging ancient spirituality and modern living. There you will find my guides and a deep journey into Aramaic, the living language of the masters, designed to help you access states of deep resonance, clarity, and personal revelation. The link is pinned in the comments. Get ready! In the next video, I will reveal more sacred Aramaic words that unlock deeper spiritual understanding. Turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Right now, before you close this video, come to the comments and tell us, what did you feel? What shifted? We read every single response. And if this teaching found you today, subscribe to this channel. Every week, we go deeper into the ancient frequency codes that were always meant to be yours.